Lesson 9.4, Completing the Square. In order to solve a quadratic, we will use a new strategy called completing the square. You may recall in Chapter 8, we learned certain patterns. One of the patterns that we learned was the perfect square trinomial. The perfect square trinomial pattern is a squared plus or minus 2ab plus b squared. Notice that in a perfect square trinomial, the first term is a perfect square. The middle term is twice the product of the square roots of the first and the last term, and the last term is a perfect square. And you may recall that in order to factor, the factors of a perfect square trinomial in this case would be a plus or minus b squared. So what we will do in this lesson is we will learn how to complete a square or force an equation or a quadratic to be a perfect square trinomial. So any quadratic in the form of x squared plus bx can be made into a perfect square trinomial by using a method called completing the square. Here are the steps that you are to follow. First, find 1/2 of b, then square the result, and thirdly, add the result to x squared plus bx. Let's practice this skill. Find the value of c that makes this equation a perfect square trinomial. Number 1, write it down. X squared plus 4x plus c. So first I need to find 1/2 of b. As you can see, b is positive 4. So half of 4 is 2. Second step says square the result. So 2 squared is 4. Therefore, c equals 4. And here's your perfect square trinomial. It would look like this. X squared plus 4x plus 4. Later on in the lesson, we will be factoring it using the pattern, and we know that this is x plus 2 squared. Okay, number 2, r squared minus 8r plus c. Okay, step number 1, let's take half of b. So that would be negative 8 divided by 2, which is negative 4. Let's take the results now, negative 4, and let's square it. That would be 16. Therefore, c is equal to 16. So let's go ahead and write that perfect square trinomial. It would be r squared minus 8r plus 16. And then in order to factor that, it would be r minus 4 squared. Okay, number 3, write it down and pause the video and try it on your own. Okay, there are your steps. Check your work. C equals 36. And then in order to factor that perfect square trinomial, you would have x minus 6 squared. Okay, now let's work on solving an equation by using this tactic of completing the square. Okay, number 4, x squared minus 6x plus 12 equals 19. We need to first make our equation into a perfect square trinomial. So let's remove the 12. That's on the left side of the equation. Okay, bring down x squared minus 6x, you're going to leave a blank there, is equal to 19 minus 12 is 7. Okay, now we need to force a perfect square trinomial, or we need to complete the square. Go back to those steps and figure out what number needs to be C in this case. Well, let's think about that. You take b, negative 6, divided in half, it would be negative 3. Take negative 3 and square it, it's positive 9. So, what I need to do is add 9 to one side of the equation to make it a perfect square trinomial. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Okay, let's bring down our equation. X squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 16. Okay, now let's factor the perfect square trinomial, which we know how to do through a pattern. It's x minus 3 squared equals 16. Now, in order to solve this equation, we need to isolate x. The first thing we have to undo here is the squaring. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the square root of one side, and whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So here, x minus 3 squared, the square root of that would be x minus 3 equals, and then radical 16 is positive negative 4. Okay, so now we need to subtract 3. So x equals, add 3. X equals positive negative 4 plus 3. So x can be 4 plus 3, or x can be negative 4 plus 3. Therefore, my solutions are 7 and negative 1. Okay, number 5. X squared minus 12x plus 3 equals 8. Again, here we need to force or make this into a perfect square trinomial. So the first thing we have to do is let's remove the 3 from both sides. So we'll bring down x squared minus 12x is equal to 5. And all I did was subtract 3 from both sides. Now let's find what C would need to be for this to be a perfect square trinomial. How do we do that? Go back and recall. We need to take b, which is negative 12, and we need to find what half of that is. Half of negative 12 would be negative 6. Then we'll take that and square it, and the number I'm looking for is 36. So what I need to do now is add 36 to both sides. So I come up with x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to 41. Okay, now we're ready to solve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pattern that I know to factor the perfect square trinomial. So it would be x minus 6 squared is equal to 41. And let's recall that now we have to take the radical of each side. Okay, so x minus 6 squared, the square root of that would be x minus 6, and now use your calculator round to the tens place to find the square root of 41, and it would be positive and negative 6.4. So now my next step is to add 6 to both sides. So here's what I have. X equals positive 6.4 plus 6. X equals negative 6.4 plus 6. So that my two solutions are negative 0.4 and positive 12.4. Okay, number 6. Copy this one down. Negative 2x squared plus 8x minus 18 equals 0. Notice that this one, although we can first go ahead and remove the 18, even if we do that, we don't have the form x squared plus bx. So we first need to get rid of that negative 2 coefficient. So the first step we're going to take is we're going to divide every term by 2. Whatever we do to one side, by negative 2, whatever we do to one side, we'll do on the other. So here we have x squared plus 4x. I'm sorry, that's minus 4x. Plus 9 is equal to 0. Okay, now we're ready to make this into a perfect square trinomial. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove 9 from either side of this equation. So let's do that. It'll be x squared minus 4x is equal to negative 9. Let's find what c needs to be in order for this to be a perfect square trinomial. So we'll take negative 4 and find half of that. That would be negative 2. Then we'll take that and square it, and we get positive 4. So we need to add 4 to both sides. X squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to negative 5. Let's go ahead and factor this perfect square trinomial. X minus 2 squared equals negative 5. And at this point in time, you should realize that this is a no real solution. If you were to try to find the radical of negative 5, you know that you cannot find the radical of a negative number. Okay, extra practice. Find the value of c that makes each trinomial a perfect square. Number 2, number 6, and number 10. And then some extra practice solving the equation by completing the square. Try 5, 12, and 16. Okay, we'll go over all your questions tomorrow. Get ready to apply this in class tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great night.